My name is Honza, and today I will be talking about dbt. I will continue on dbt wave after cookie, and I will be talking about data sandbox and how we can boost our developer experience with that automated sandbox in dbt. And I will be talking mainly about transformations, right? Because dbt is around transformation or transforming the data on the and in our case on Snowflake data warehouse, but the concepts are applicable for other database engines as well, maybe with some performance issues, but still if you have Snowflake, you can use it. So at first I will talk about the data sandbox, what it is, why and when do we need it. Then I will do a quick intro to dbt, but thanks to the last question, Cookie already did some quick intro, so I will maybe skip a few slides. And then I will talk a bit about the sandbox implementation in dbt. And yeah, so let's get started. So data sandbox, we usually, when we are talking about transformations, we usually need some data to transform, right? And when we want to follow some software engineering best practices, we usually don't want to modify production data. And at the same time, when we develop or modify some transformations, we usually don't want to work with data that are changing in the background, not like basically under our hands. And this is like quite a solution, or the reason, not solution, the reason why we need something like data sandbox. So this data sandbox is, in this case, the isolated environment. In Snowflake, it can be isolated schema. In other engines, we can call it database as well. And it's about like calling or copying the production data into this schema or isolated environment and running the transformations against these data, against these tables. But the question, like, because I mentioned developer experience, and you can imagine that if you have quite big transformation that has a lot of dependencies, for example, in this case, we have some amplitude events transformation that has 7 direct dependencies and like more than 20 indirect dependencies, it can be quite hard to detect all these dependencies and copy all the data into the schema, right? So we need to have some tooling, some automated sandbox tooling that can like populate or copy the data into this, in this case, Snowflake schema. The sandbox or the sandbox isolated environment we can use on development, during the development. And still during the development, we could potentially clone or copy the models manually into our schema. But when this process is not manageable is during the CI pipeline, for example, when we want to run some tests, or when we want to run actually modified models or created transformations or models in dbt. And in this case, like, it's hard to manually push or clone the data into the schema, and that's definitely the space when again we need some tool around that. Here is just quick intro to how our stack in Snowflake looks like. On the left side, you can see that we have a production like under the red color or above the red color. We shouldn't touch this this stack in our development or during our development. On the right side, we have let's say our free space where we can actually do anything we want. We can develop new transformations, we can modify the transformations, but again, when we run these transformations, they don't modify the production data. In the production, we are using a lot of schemas. For example, the first one is the production schema, which is connected to Looker or Looker. We are using, as Peter was talking about, as my main BI tool, and it's connected to production. Then we have a few dbt schemas, which is for basically runtime or space for dbt in production to run the models, run the transformations. And then we have also a lot of source schemas where we store the raw data. And yeah, to store the raw data that are being later processed by dbt. But on the right side, you can see that we have only few schemas. In this case, I have my own schema and Rasa, and then we have also the run schema for CI pipelines. And then in the middle, we have the sandbox macro that is, like cloning the data to our schemas to ensure that we are able to run all transformation we have modified or we have created, and yeah, we need a option. We need to have an option to run them in our separated environment again. So right now, a very quick few things around dbt. dbt, as Cookie mentioned, it's data build tool, and we use that for transformations. It's a CLI tool. Also, it has a web application, web UI. But right now, let's focus only on the transformation. And it's kind of only a T and ELT shortcut, means extract, load, transform. And basically, if you want to load some data into your warehouse, you have to use some other tools. You can use plain Python, for example, but there are other tools like Stitch, Fivetran. Also, we have Kebula Visitor, so you can use Kebula. And then, like, dbt expects that all the data are in your warehouse, and then you can run the dbt models, the transformations, and BI tools can consume the transform data, and also it can be consumed by other data consumers. This is very simple example of how the dbt model looks like. It's kind of transformation. You can see that the models are only select statements. It's not allowed to have multiple queries in the single model. If you need somehow pre-process the data, you need to use common table expression like with statements or create new models. But also, as Cookie again mentioned, dbt has a support for Jinja templating language, and it's really like great feature, and it's really critical for us. And also, it's critical for this talk for our data sandbox, because thanks to that, we are able to develop things like that. And the Jinja is being used by, or the examples here are, for example, the config function that's used to define some config parameters. In this case, I'm just saying that I want to full load the table each time when I run the model. And also, there are some ref functions. The ref functions are used by dbt to basically build the lineage graph, to manage all dependencies, and also the ref functions are resolved into strings to Snowflake, in our case, identifiers at the runtime. So after this SQL is compiled, we no longer will see the ref functions there, but the actual identifiers in the database. And then I said that it's mainly the CLI tool, so we run the models by writing or running the dbt run commands. We can specify the model's name, or we also can build some more complex selectors. In this case, you can see that we can use some tags and other config parameters, for example. More about the Jinja. It supports for loops, if statements, and it's basically adding programming support to SQL. We can say that in this way. And you can define your own functions or macros. You can define your own variables, use that for and statements, return some values from the functions. And also, dbt has some built-in macros and variables. I already mentioned the ref and config. It's not working. Yeah. Oh, sorry, wrong button. The ref and it's quite a cool feature. Ref and config. But also, we have source, which is just similar to ref function that is referencing existing models in dbt. But source is referencing existing source tables. But we have also the rank query macro, which is very important for us today. And also we have a graph variable in the Jinja context, which is, in my opinion, the best variable in dbt, because this variable basically contains everything about your DBT project, about your models you have in your DBT project, all their dependencies, all their tags, descriptions, columns, their data types, and much more, like compiled SQL, for example. And with that, like with the combination of the graph variable and run query macro that can execute custom queries, not only the select statements in your model, I think that you can imagine that you can do basically anything you want with or around your DBT models. Also, I'll be talking, or I will mention, and I will show you a few screenshots from the code. We don't have time to go really line by line with the sandbox macro, but if you want to check the whole code, you can definitely go to GitHub, Productboard lab/dbt Snowflake Sandbox, and you can copy the code, use it in your DBT project. And we also, or I am planning to do the DBT plugin. We haven't committed as a team, but we will see. And hopefully you will be able to use it directly from DBT libraries or extensions. So just an example how you can use the graph variable. This is the actual function or macro we are using in Sandbox. Sandbox macro, and with that we want to get only the definition, the definition of model by its name. You can see that I have here some for loop that is iterating through the graph nodes, and nodes are basically the models in DBT, and it's just returning the, let's say, JSON object or simple object with that has all dependencies, as I mentioned, by the name of the model, and if it's found, it returns the model. If not, it just returns none. And in the next screenshot, you can see how you can basically define the variables. In this case, we are defining here the query variable, and you can see that we don't have to use only select statements as we have to in models, but you can also use the create or replace table statements, and you can do there also some other DDL operation, not just DML. And in this case, we are just creating some table and cloning the production tables and running the query with the run query method or function. And you can also see a few log functions that are also available in Jinja context to actually see what's happening in the macro. Right now, a quick demo. Also just give how we are using the sandbox macro in Productboard. I mentioned at the beginning that we can have some amplitude events, transformation, or for example, spaces transformation. And when we would like to clone our models into our workspace, we would, again, need to go through the transformation code and just detect all dependencies. But thanks to the built-in DBT dependency graph, we are able to iterate through that and basically automate this step, and we can automate it during the development, but also we can automate it during our CI pipelines when we want to dry run our transformations, our models, to actually verify they can run or run some functions. And you can see that it's cloning, I don't know, 10, 11 tables in a few seconds. And just small comment on that, we are using here sandbox alias or sandbox shell script, and it's just because we will need to use this very long run operation command in DBT, and it's quite hard to write it correctly without like missing any quotes and stuff like that. So we have just a shell wrapper around that, and we are just providing the names of the models. And yeah, that's it. So I was talking about sandbox, why and when and where we need it. Very quick intro to DBT and a few things around DBT macro. Definitely check out the GitLab, or sorry, not GitLab, it's on GitHub repo, use it, and that's it. So thank you for your attention. Yeah, so we have time again for just 3 questions, so we can continue with the next speaker. And yeah, great question. How do you orchestrate your DBT runs? Where does Kebula come in? So we are orchestrating with Kebula still. We have a custom component in Kebula, which is triggering the DBT orchestration or DBT jobs in the web application in DBT. So our ETL flow, let's say, is that we use Kebula for extracting data, and we also use our own Snowflake database under Kebula. And so we extract the data, and then we call the DBT job in the UI or through API. And because we are using the same database, same Snowflake database, in the DBT and Kebula, we are able to access the data that are extracted by Kebula, and then we can run the DBT models. Okay, next question. So how many people are there in the Productboard data team? So we have 6 people in the data team, plus we have data analysts. So we can say like they belongs in the data team as well, or data tribe. And we have how many data analysts? 5, 6, 7 right now, yeah. But the core data team or data engineering team is 6 people. Do you use DBT metrics? No, we don't use DBT metrics. And I think that was the 3rd question. Okay, so thank you for your attention and welcome the next speaker.